broadly, as you look back on all the years, what would you say have been the ADL's greatest successes and perhaps the not so successes?
Well, I would say the biggest non-success or failure wasn't really, and it's related to a question you asked me earlier about the 1930s, but it really relates to how the organization was founded and what our mandate was. We were founded, as I said, by B'nai B'rith. B'nai B'rith was an international organization, even though they weren't involved in the issues. We were, but they basically said to the ADL founders, you stick to America and you don't have a responsibility for the world. So when there were books written about the role of American Jewry during the Holocaust, they're usually not very complimentary to American Jews. That American Jews didn't rise to the occasion when the horrors were taking place. There isn't a lot of criticism of ADL, but that's not a compliment. It's just that nobody thought of ADL as an international organization in those days. So the fact that we were not, to my view, was the biggest failure, even though we didn't have a choice in those days. We were instructed to, but if I have any regrets, it's I wish we had been that kind of an organization that would have really stood up for the Jews of Europe in their most perilous moments. We did learn the lesson because right after the war, our leadership said, if we're going to be the most serious organization fighting anti-Semitism after the murder of 6 million Jews and then the founding of the State of Israel, we have to adopt an international agenda that we haven't had. And we said we opened up a European department, a Latin America, a Middle East department, an office of Jews, and international. And as I said, I was head of international for ADL for many years. So there's no doubt that American issues of hate and anti-Semitism are our #1 priority. But we became extremely engaged on the international scene because we said if we're going to be serious about protecting Jews, you can't ignore what happens to Israel, what happened to Soviet Jewry, and all those issues that we became very involved in.
How do you believe social media, has it changed the anti-Semitic landscape? And how has the ADL?
By the way, I realize I didn't answer the positive side of your question.
Okay.
There's no successes, and there are quite a few, but I would just list a few very quickly without going into details. I'm sure we don't have time, but our leadership, well, we were the main organization that got past 2 pieces of legislation in the 1970s, which made it illegal for American companies to participate in the Arab boycott of Israel. And that to this day is on the books and really basically negated much of the Arab boycott. So that was huge. We became the major organization in the 1980s and 90s, developing what came to be known as hate crime legislation, which basically said, we deal with hate all the time, but if there's a hate crime, there'll be special penalties. The Supreme Court upheld it because we made a distinction between hate speech and hate action, again protecting the First Amendment. So the whole area of hate crimes has been a huge thing. And I would just add, obviously there were a lot of things I could talk about, but I would just add 2 other programs. One, which I participated in for over 20 years, which is one of the more untold stories and a more positive story of the Jewish community, and is the relationship with the Catholic world, which historically was so terrible. But after Vatican II, Catholic-Jewish relations took on a whole different thing. And we developed a program for Catholic school teachers called Bearing Witness, in which we trained over 2,500 teachers over 20 years who went back to their schools and taught their kids completely different things about Jews and Judaism that Catholics had been hearing for centuries. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of. And the last one I would talk about, and I think you started to ask me about social media.
Yes.
We had a program. All right, so let's talk about social media. So you want to ask me about that?